I remember the moment the phone left my hand, as if it were carved into my memory with the sharp edge of Jocelyn's fury. We stood in the sunroom, afternoon light slanting through the plantation shutters and sketching patterns across the hardwood floor. I'd just ended a quiet call with a recruiter, one I hadn't even pursued yet, and was staring at the screen considering my next move. I hadn't built up the courage to reply. I leaned back into the wicker love seat, running a thumb along the edge of the cushions. That's when Jocelyn swept in, her heels clicking like a verdict. She looked at my phone like it was evidence in a case she'd already won. She didn't hesitate. She yanked it from my hand, the plastic frame snapping against her palm, and flung it downward. The crack that spat out of the hardwood felt like the first crack in everything I'd built with her. The phone hit the floor with more finality than any argument we'd ever had. I watched. It skid and tumble, landing face up in a spiderweb of fractured glass. My breath caught. I stepped forward, half ready to snatch it back, half yearning to let it lie broken. Jocelyn's voice cut through the hush that followed. "You won't need this anymore," she said, lips curled into something meant to crush. She gave a cold, half smile, crossed her arms, head tilted, waiting for me to react. Shame and fear collided in my chest. In her eyes, I saw the version of myself she no longer tolerated. The quiet provider, the background fixture, the man without ambition. "I'll decide what's best for you from now on," she added, venom threading through every word. And suddenly, I knew. Pretending wasn't an option anymore. I crouched and picked up the phone, spine stiff with a mix of rage and relief. The screen had blackened around the fracture like a spider's web. Ran a trembling finger across the glass and felt the shards bite into my skin. My phone, my lifeline to any world outside her control, had been declared useless by the one person I trusted most. I stood and tucked it into my pocket, wincing, at the splinters that dug into my thigh. I could feel her gaze on me, gathering satisfaction in the quiet. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just furious about the phone. I was furious at the carcass of our marriage, at the honors she once lavished on me, at the career I'd sidelined, at the muted voice I'd settled for. I closed my eyes, inhaled, exhaled. The easy facade I'd maintained snapped apart, like that phone. Jocelyn turned, walking toward the hallway that led to the rest of the house. She hadn't emptied the duffel bag I'd stashed in the garage months ago, carefully packed with items for emergencies I hoped would never come. I followed her without a word, each step echoing on the floorboards, until she paused at the threshold of the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready," she called over her shoulder. Her tone was clipped, businesslike, as though we were preparing for a board meeting instead of a night that would mark the end of everything I once believed. Didn't respond. I let her assumption hang in the air, because I knew there would be no dinner for me. Not tonight. I turned away from her back and slipped into the garage. The lights were dim, but I knew every inch of that space, every rust spot on the metal shelving, every oil stain on the concrete. I reached for the duffel bag. The canvas was warm under my hand. I unzipped it, feeling the resistance of fabric against metal. Inside lay the passport I'd renewed in secret, the bills of cash I'd been siphoning into the toolbox each week after payday, the burner phone I'd hidden under the attic rafters. No laptop, no photographs, no reminders of the life I was abandoning. The contents were sparse, skeletal almost. Yet they represented more freedom than anything I'd ever owned. I closed the bag with a decisive snap and slung it over my shoulder. Upstairs, Jocelyn's voice drifted through the walls, laughter and the clink of wine glasses as she laid out hors d'oeuvres for her guests. She bragged about the new beach house in Kaya, the one that wasn't even paid off yet, but sounded like proof of her success. Her words rolled out in a practiced cadence, as natural to her as breathing. I touched my pocket where the broken phone nestled, and a strange calm settled over me. I realized I'd been living in a gilded cage, feeding her ego at the expense of my own worth. She was preparing to host another, superficial gathering, while I prepared to reclaim my life. I paused at the top of the stairs and looked back at the duffel bag, half tempted to leave it behind and walk away lighter. Still, but I knew I'd need those few items if I stood any chance of vanishing. I took a deep breath, pushed past the faint aroma of her perfume that clung to the hallway air, and slipped out the front door into the cool night. The house lights framed, her silhouette in the sunroom window, golden and distant, as she welcomed her friends. I walked down the driveway, duffel bag bouncing against my hip, heart pounding with every step. I carried with me nothing but the clothes on my back, the passport, the cash, and the memory of her voice declaring my obsolescence. In the hush of the night, I paused by the curb and looked back at the house. It felt more like a prison than a home. The windows glowed, and I could swear I heard her laugh. I let the sound fade as I stepped onto the street, the duffel bag a reassuring weight against my side. Didn't look back again. I walked into the darkness, leaving the cracked phone on the floor of the sunroom and the remnants of our life behind, and for the first time in years, I felt something new. The raw, exhilarating edge of freedom. Had wasn't physical. It was psychological. It was withdrawal from power. The bank accounts were locked. Her keys didn't work. The Vermont cabin was gone. Her assistant had tried to pick up dry cleaning using the business credit card, only to be told the account no longer existed. Jocelyn had spun so many plates for so long, she'd never expected one to fall, let alone all of them at once. The club nurse administered oxygen. Jocelyn lay on the antique rug, her face pale against the shimmer of her pearls, a breathing mask covering the mouth that had once dictated my life. When the EMTs arrived, she refused to go to the hospital. She sat up slowly, refusing to stretch, shaking her head at Mallory and whispering something like, "Don't let them take pictures." Still thinking about the optics. Always the optics. That evening, she was taken home in a private car, a blanket draped over her shoulders. But the real damage had already been done, and not just to her image. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Jocelyn was faced with a question she couldn't answer, a system she couldn't bend. What happens when the man you thought you owned walks